Rockaways Productions presents The Casey Waters Show, episode 509, My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell, Part 3. Hello, I'm your host, Casey Waters, and today I have Squeaks with me. Well, actually, I have another cat, Freya, at my feet, out of camera range. And Squeaks, I guess, might be partially within camera range with her tail coming up in my face. Gee. Today, I will continue with My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell. Here, the author looks at the nature of reality and the nature of ourselves in terms of our perceptions and how we view the big picture of life. So, today's show will feature background footage from Mountains to Sea Trail. The section I hiked is along the Blue Ridge Parkway between US 25 and NC 191 near Asheville, North Carolina. I believe it was Dingle Creek where I pulled over, but I'm not quite sure. Then I headed south, eventually crossing I-26 on the Blue Ridge Parkway Bridge, then continuing on for a little more of trail beyond that. So, now let's continue with My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell. If you equate the decrease of a digital system's entropy with the increase of its energy and synergy, you got the picture and an adequate understanding of how these words are being used. In the digital world, organization is the driver and animator of growth, profitability, substance, and content. Organization is the ultimate form of energy. In PMR, organization, particularly in PMR organization, particles into atoms, atoms into molecules, and molecules into various forms of matter is the ultimate source of our usable energy. The physical world is organized into being according to its defining rule set. The digital world, which subsumes the virtual physical world, consists only of organization, nothing else. Reality is organized bits. Now, let's go to page 366 of My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell. In matters of importance, the intellect seldom has but a tiny fraction of the truth data required for useful logical analysis. Nevertheless, the intellect offers an illusion of being logical as it creates a smokescreen of self-serving belief, need, and fear-based rationale to serve the ego's needs. It is in the service of the ego that the average intellect spends most of its time and energy. There are exceptions, but they are exceedingly rarer than a poll of intellectuals would indicate. Most of the exceptions belong to a relatively small and impersonal set of crank turning tasks that require some serious intellectual effort, mostly day jobs, requiring a high level of analytical skills. The ego, being closer to the fear, has the job of building and maintaining a feel good fantasy barrier between the fear and the intellect. The ego, in collusion with the intellect, builds a complex delusional structure held together by convenient beliefs that justify an intricate web of interactive needs, wants, and desires. The ego is reactive and has no power of its own, though it has great influence by virtue of its job of counterbalancing the fear. Now, let's go to page 367. The common ego attributes of arrogance, self importance, and self righteousness are merely a few of the construction devices, such as arches, vertical walls, and pitched roofs, that the ego uses to build and maintain its delusion. If others evaluate an individual as egotistical, it means the fantasy built by that individual's intellect ego reality construction team is obvious to the vision and understanding of others. The degree to which you are capable of understanding the fantasy structure of others is dependent on your own personal fantasy structures. The devices you use to maintain your fantasies or delusions are largely not understood for what they are, whether they are employed by yourself or by others. To see with clear vision, you must first become detached and fearless in the face of ignorance. Without fear, there is no need for ego, no use for needs, wants, or beliefs. What basic desires remain are natural, healthy, and in consonance with right being and spiritual growth. They create no conflict. To complete the picture of ego, as defined above, you must be aware of its opposites, humility and compassion. Humility allows for confidence, certainty, self assuredness, purpose, and passion, while carrying an underlying implication of an awareness and recognition of limitations, the limitations of which humility is aware can originate inside or outside the individual. A wholly artificial distinction, but one that will aid the clarity of the explanation. An awareness of inside limitations recognizes the limits of individual knowledge and understanding. It acknowledges its own ignorance and is accepting of the ignorance of others. An individual who fully appreciates the value, significance, and importance of others, as well as understands his or her own responsibility to be of service, reflects genuine humility. Humility breeds compassion and vice versa. Outside limitations spring from an understanding of the laws, properties, and requirements of reality. Humility and compassion require an individual to understand his or her limited role within the big picture. And as arrogance waxes, humility wanes. Now, let's go to page 369 of My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell. The idea that religious organizations help their members to substantially decrease the entropy of their consciousness is, for the most part, wishful thinking, a belief that makes everyone feel better. It is this unsubstantiated notion that organized religion somehow imbues spiritual quality that justifies religious organization, fills their coffers with gold, and swells their ranks with both believers and fanatics. History tells a different story. Present experience, as well as an accurate account of the world's past events, demonstrate that the potential of religious belief to stimulate genuine spiritual growth remains largely theoretical and non actualized, while its potential to ferment hatred and intolerance is unmatched by any other human institution. Power, politics, and cultural beliefs, no doubt, take second and third place in history's hall of shame. Most of the world's worst conduct has been committed by a combination of all three working together: religious and cultural belief in the service of power, politics, the manipulation of religious and cultural beliefs, exploiting ignorance and ego, common fears, beliefs, and desires, to gain economic, personal, professional, and political advantage is an all too familiar story to any student of history or current events. The unholy triumvirate of religious belief, cultural belief, and ego driven power politics clearly displays the nature and results of high entropy consciousness: ego, belief, need, fear, power, and desire. These three, in various combinations, seem to be at the source of most of the evil let loose in the world as far back as history can see, and as far into the future as anyone dare guess. Now, let's go to page 372 of My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell. In interacting with others, particularly those we are unfamiliar with, we tend to lead or open with our image, tailor it slightly to custom fit the situation, then wear that image like a costume. In that way, we lead others to participate in our fantasy as we participate in theirs. Eventually, we become lost in our fantasy and do not know who or what lies at the core of our being. We cannot tell the costume from our skin. A common dream is one in which you are at work or school or church and suddenly realize that you are naked or otherwise inappropriately dressed or undressed or totally unprepared and unfit for whatever it is you are about to do. Ever wonder why you have those dreams repeatedly, they dramatize a core fear. Not only is our ego fantasy faux being construct itself a reaction to fear, but as a bonus, we get to fear the transparency we are exposed, or the real us is found out of the fantasy itself, as well as fear the inadequacy of the fantasy to continue to fool ourselves and others. Fear of exposure and inadequacy are companion fears born of a deeper knowledge of our self delusion and manifested according to the individual personality. That is why hiding behind a costume makes us feel more secure. Psychologists would have you believe that a healthy ego is a good thing, a necessity for success within our culture. When an individual is driven by the types and intensities of fear, desire, wants, needs, expectations, and beliefs that are average for his culture, he is pronounced normal, a healthy, by definition, member of his group. Many erroneously believe that a certain amount of a don't tread on me attitude is necessary to avoid being pushed around by others. The idea that no ego is synonymous with weak, powerless, and effete demonstrates a lack of understanding of the nature and dynamics of consciousness. Low personal entropy, high personal power, fearlessness, love, and no ego are all on the same team. Beings with low or no ego have the highest quality consciousness and the greatest personal power. The truth of this statement does not rely on some odd definition of personal power. The personal power I am speaking of subsumes the standard definition: the power to take charge of your life, to defend yourself in the face of determined hostility, to find satisfaction and fulfillment, to lead and inspire others, to accomplish great and lasting things in both the physical and the non physical realities in which we exist, flows most naturally from the same process that dissolves ego. Now, let's go to page 374. When you are animated by love, you are not driven by fear, ego, desire, or need. There is no forcing function driving your choices. Love is directed outward. With love, you are at peace, solid, still, fearless, and centered. This is not a control issue. Control does not create balance, but only the appearance of balance. A balanced individual is a conscious part of the unified larger reality, a productive citizen of the larger consciousness ecosystem, and is aware of being interconnected to everything. External balance, being in balance with everything external to the individual, is an immediate and automatic consequences of internal balance. Internal balance precedes and enables external balance. It does not work the other way around. Trying hard to appear as if you are balanced does little to produce real balance. Truth does not flow from fantasy. The big picture cannot be derived from the little picture. When right being and right action are natural, easy, and obvious, you are in balance. For large systems as well as individual entities, balance defines the minimum entropy state at any given time, under any given circumstance. Balance is not a digital on off function, it represents a continuum from the highest entropy consciousness, wild, angry, insane, frantic, self centered, random, confused, hurt, threatened, fearful, demanding, vengeful, jealous, self important, and inadequate, all artifacts of fear and ego, to the lowest entropy consciousness, balanced, fearless, egoless, compassionate, humble, and expressive of unconditional love. Now, let's go to page 379 of My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell. Because some will be forced by habit to project delusion into the mind of AUM, let's look at the historical record, historical, mythical, and theological reports of Greek, Jewish, Roman, Christian, and Muslim gods being egotistical, vengeful, jealous, angry, demanding, pouty, upset, self important, and violent, all traits of a large, dysfunctional ego, are most likely an artifact of God being described by man, in the image of man, to satisfy the needs and purposes of men. In other words, the common description among many of the world's popular religions of an egotistical, delusional God is most likely the result of men projecting their own egotism upon their concept of God. God made in the image of man, and offers no credible evidence, guilty by vague association, against the mental and spiritual health of AUM. Now, let's go to page 380. Hypothesize AUM as a large natural system of self-modifying digital organization, consciousness in the process of evolving. Such a concept has no reliance upon any belief, much less belief in an egotistical sugar daddy who will damn you for eternity if you do not profess belief in the proper things in the proper way. How is unconditional love, compassion, joy, and humility expressed by that attitude? There is obviously no overlap between AUM and religious dogma. However, there may be some overlap between evolving consciousness and at least some religious values, because religion often speaks to human values, and human values at their root evolve from the values of low entropy consciousness. There may also be a connection between religion and low entropy consciousness because of religion's occasional association with those who have deeply known big truth and nobly tried to embody it and package it for large numbers of others. Unfortunately, history shows that such an effort, no matter how noble, does not work well and usually ends up ugly and twisted for the majority who eventually try to reach salvation through ritual, dogma, closed mindedness, and violence. All giant steps in the opposite direction from spiritual growth, love, and lower entropy. Ritual, dogma, closed mindedness, hate, and violence, the historical trappings of religion at the common level, can appeal only to the short sighted, feel good, feel superior, feel saved needs of ego. Now, let's go to page 387. From the viewpoint of digital mind space, all realities, except the larger consciousness system we call AUM, could be described as virtual realities. The computer itself is a fundamental reality, while the simulations running within it constitute virtual realities. From the viewpoint of the consciousness evolution fractal ecosystem, Casey Waters Show. Producer, Casey Waters. Graphic editing, Judson Laird. Please note our new email address, CaseyWaters2 at CaseyWaters.com.